Welcome, everyone. Welcome back to the show. It's your host, Danny Haifong. As you can see, I am joined by Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson, former Chief of Staff of Colin Powell, the State Department, and U.S. Army Colonel, retired now. We also have Patrick Henningsen, geopolitical analyst, independent journalist, joining today. Thanks so much, gentlemen, for joining me. We have a lot to get to.
Thank you. Cheers, Danny.
Yeah. Well, let's get to it. So I want to begin with the breaking news. Okay, the breaking news is that there have been 3 F-15 fighter jets that have been downed in Kuwait. CENTCOM is saying that this was friendly fire by Kuwaiti, firing off their air defenses at these F-15s. They happened in a very short period of time. Iran is saying that they fired at these F-15s and are responsible for it. I'm just going to play a quick video and get your reaction, especially Colonel Wilkerson, because this, I think, is a pattern that we are seeing now in this war. Here we go. Here is the fighter jet. That the video is going around not only on social media, but Western mainstream media has been confirming this. So, Colonel Wilkerson, please help us understand what may have happened here and what has been your reaction overall to what's been going on in this war that the U.S. and Israel launched at the end of February?
To the specific incident that you're showing the video of, we will probably never know the truth of who did what to whom. Both sides stories are believable. Friendly fire on 3 aircraft is approaching unbelievability, but it could be. But that's irrelevant, really, except as it exemplifies the nature of this conflict. What we have here is a failure to understand, as Clausewitz was so emphatic in saying was critical, the nature of this war. And the understanding is gross and most unbelievable on the side of the empire. I cannot believe that we have started this the way we started it, the way we are propagandizing it, and it is major propaganda. You can't find a mainstream media source in America, I dare you, that isn't putting out the propaganda of the administration and ultimately of you-know-who, Bibi Netanyahu and the Israel lobby. So you just have to discount that, and then you have to say to yourself, well, Americans aren't as stupid as I thought they were, because polls now show damning evidence that even MAGA and much of the Republican following of Donald Trump, to percentages unparalleled in the past with actions like this, are against it. And across the country, it looks like you could say fairly that 3/4 of the American people are opposed to this war. So we have a president starting a war unconstitutionally, no question about that. No question whatsoever about that. Toss the War Powers Act out. It was an abridgment of the Constitution anyway. Go to the actual Constitution, and this is a impeachable offense of the first order that Donald Trump has embarked on. And then let's talk about the nature of the war, which Clausewitz, of course, points out is a crucial assessment. On the Iranian side, and that is the valid side, I think, it's going to be a very long war, a very long war. And it's going to incorporate a lot of casualties no one was contemplating in both materiel, in economies, and in actual people killed. Ask the Israelis, who had one strike that I think, 9 killed, 70 wounded, and 6 missing in action already. And that's a couple of hours, or at least maybe 24 hours ago. So this is going to have ramifications all across the region that none of us can calculate or estimate right now. I think one of the reasons, for example, Iran is doing something that I thought as a military professional would be unwise to do early on. But I think I glean their operational approach here and even the strategy behind it. They are attacking some of the people in the region, Arab countries in particular, that aren't necessarily their enemies or not their avowed enemies at the moment. And they're doing that because they want to get the people on the street, as happened so vividly in Bahrain, to cheer when they attack. And that's what they're getting. We might have another Arab Spring, if you will, that is actually successful in overthrowing some of these tyrants who are our allies. And then the last thing I would say about the nature of the war, which I think is critical here, there's no way the empire can put up with this. And let's just look at some parameters here. When we went to war in 1940-41, and we really went to war in 1936 and 37, we were already building the supply route through Iran, for example, into the belly of the Soviet Union. So when we went, we had 70 million roughly in Germany and 70 million roughly in Japan. We put 12 million men in the field. And the strategic assessment by Admiral King and by George Marshall was that that was inadequate to confront the German number of divisions. The maximum we could build from that was 100 divisions. But we were smart. We knew the Soviets ultimately would take the bulk of the casualties in that war. And we knew that we had to supply the rest of the allies, all of them we supplied from the arsenal of democracy, as it were. That's the best title of our World War II strategy, by the way. We kept a lot of men, in other words, in the industrial base in order to be that arsenal of democracy. 12 million men. We couldn't put 500,000, Danny, in the field today. And that's what it would take to subdue this very resolute country of 90 million people in Iran, about 53% of whom are Persian, and another 20 to 25% are right there with them in solidarity with regard to this. And you've seen that sort of exemplified by, I couldn't believe the mainstream media putting up the pictures of the people protesting the regime, and then just a brief look at the people protesting the death of Khomeini. It was incredible, the difference. Millions came out, and they coming out all across the Muslim world too, from Pakistan down to
Pakistan is on fire right now.
Yeah. So, and at war with Afghanistan, of all things. I mean, Kabul going up against a nuclear power. Are you dumb or something? But this is what we're doing, and the nature of this war is not realized by this idiot in charge of the empire or the idiot in charge of his Pentagon. They simply do not understand what they're embarked upon, and they are going to get a rude awakening.
Yeah. Well, Patrick, I'm going to pass it to you, and as I do, I'm going to play more footage of what happened with these downed F-15 fighter jets. When I heard this, Patrick, I said, no matter what the explanation, this is an incredibly humiliating scene. Even the explanation that CENTCOM is giving is incredibly humiliating, given that it's Iran's response that has caused this panic and, of course, all of the military problems that we are seeing surface in the mainstream media. But your thoughts, your assessment.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. If it was friendly fire, I'm not surprised at all. And as you can see, that manned fighter aircraft is not something that the Iranians have invested heavily in the last 20 years. They're invested in drones, missile technology, air defense. And this is one of the deconfliction issues that you might see that's somewhat embarrassing, but one of the good things about this, from the Iranian point of view, is obviously the public relations optics for the U.S. public opinion as we're approaching a vote in Congress. But I just want to backpedal on the congressional vote. This vote could have happened last week, with Ro Khanna and Thomas Massie had this ready on the table, and it was people like Chuck Schumer, the Democratic senator, that said, "Oh yeah, sure, we want to vote on that, but let's do that later. Let's do that in a week." So clearly, Chuck Schumer and others knew this war was happening on the weekend, and they chose to drag their heels on that effort. And that's something that should be known to the American people in the world, is that all of these senators and congressmen that are bought and paid for by the Israeli lobby are intervening in our constitutional due process on behalf of a foreign entity. The other thing is, Donald Trump did not consult Congress or beforehand, but U.S. this is important. U.S. are working hand in glove with Israel. You can't separate the two. They like to play good cop, bad cop. This is all theater. So Bibi Netanyahu briefed the Knesset and his security committee about U.S. operations that were coming up on the weekend. But Donald Trump didn't brief our Congress and on U.S. operations that were coming up on the weekend. To me, this is a constitutional crisis in the United States of America. And this president has completely disregarded his obligations and his duties as a chief executive of the United States of America and bypassed our system, our constitutional system, in order to serve and accommodate a foreign entity. And I think this is so clear. This is so clear. It's embarrassing on one level, but on another level, it really should shock people. And then the cavalier attitude of Trump and people like Lindsey Graham, just kind of waving their hand about U.S. servicemen being killed. Like, well, it happens. There's going to be more, but this is a fight worth fighting for. And then Pete Hegseth goes in front of a press briefing saying that we didn't start this war, but we're going to finish it. No. The U.S. did start this war. The U.S. did start this. This was premeditated. They agreed on December 29th in Mar-a-Lago on the date of this attack. Might have been delayed a week or a few days or whatever, but this was already premeditated. So the whole facade of peace negotiations or nuclear negotiations was again a ruse and used to provide cover for a sneak attack. So this is the way the United States is doing its business in the world, and this is what they're projecting out to other superpowers like China, Russia, India, and everybody else. And the U.S. has kind of inadvertently put the world on notice as to the fact that it is a rogue actor in the international system. We don't even need to comment on Israel. Everybody knows what you're dealing with there. But there should be no question globally that this administration, particularly, of what they're capable of, which is doing high-level negotiations, even bringing it to Geneva with the full intention. And this is why, I'm going to make this point, and this is not a flippant point. This is absolutely factual. This is why Donald Trump has the Israeli lobby have inserted Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner as the chief diplomats of U.S. foreign policy, so they could front run all of these negotiations that multiple times have been used as cover for a sneak attack. So they're working on behalf of Israel. That means effectively, de facto, these are Israeli agents who are posing as diplomats, who don't have any official portfolio with the State Department, and are sitting there basically running this facade, this vaudeville show that looks like diplomacy, or is meant to look like diplomacy. Meanwhile, they're preparing military actions to start an undeclared, unprovoked war of aggression. Not once. They've done it twice. They've done it, if I count the Nasrallah, Hezbollah negotiations, or the Hamas negotiations, or the 2 times they've done this in Ukraine. We're up to 5 sneak attacks in 12 months. Excuse me? I mean, this just defies analysis at this point. You're dealing with a criminal gang that have usurped the White House, and they are not working for the American people or the United States of America. They are working exclusively on behalf of a foreign entity. I mean, there's no way to deny this at this point. This is all the proof that we would ever need. They did it again. And I don't know. I don't know at this point.
Yeah, no, important words, Patrick. Now, Colonel Wilkerson, given what Patrick is saying, I just want to show some of the casualty numbers on the U.S. side. of course, Iranians have taken a beating, hundreds, including, of course, a horrible attack on the school that killed over 150 school children, girls. But here's what Iran has said. They say that 560 service members have been injured or killed up until this time under Operation True Promise 4. That's from the IRGC itself. What CENTCOM is saying is that about 4 people have been killed, or at least 6 now, maybe it might be, given that there have been more reports about this. But CENTCOM is keeping it very low. About 6 have been killed so far. And this is what Iran has done. This is all of the places that it has hit. U.S. military, naval, air bases, etc. So, Colonel Wilkerson, what do you make of this? I mean, Donald Trump has said that there will be a guarantee that more Americans die. Pete Hegseth just said it as well. I mean, how do you react to such a thing?
Well, first thing let me say is that I agree with every word that Patrick just said, and I'll just re-emphasize the fact that this is the highest impeachable offense anywhere, certainly on the agenda of people like James Madison and Thomas Jefferson and George Washington and a host of other of our founders. This was it. This is why they put the impeachment clause in our Constitution, taking the country to a nefarious, undeclared, unconstitutional violation of international law. Lay down your marker and it will be valid, I assure you, is the #1 impeachable offense. And the very first thing that should start, and it won't for the very reason that Patrick said, because Schumer is a lobbyist, is a compliment for the Jewish lobby par excellence, and is buried in Israel's rear end, just like Mike Huckabee and a host of other people, including the director of the CIA. So it isn't going to happen. But that shows you how perilous our straits are right now to remain even a modicum of a democratic federal republic, or better said, a federal republic with democratic aspects. We're disappearing. And counting beans in a field and targets hit and tactical things like that are really not what should be going on right now. What should be going on is a fundamental assessment of this enterprise that we are embarked upon right now, which has no outcome, none whatsoever, but disaster. And I don't just mean on the side of the United States, I mean on the side of regional players too, not least of which is Iran. A lot of people are going to die in Iran, but they are resolute, and they are resolute to the point where this is going to be a long, bloody conflict. And even if Trump were to say, let's stop, they probably would not. And the deeper we get into it, that probably becomes a certainty. So the nature of this conflict is significantly misinterpreted by people like Hegseth and Trump and others in the administration, and by people like Lindsey Graham and Chuck Schumer. We are embarked upon something that is going to really tear at us, majorly tear at us. And we're doing it at a time when Xi Jinping has publicly announced in a document that you can make no mistake about, that China has reached the pinnacle in so many areas: technology, economic might, industrial base, shipbuilding, you name it. But the one place they haven't, and he says this in his pronouncement. I didn't think I'd see this in Xi Jinping's time. I thought Deng Xiaoping still had enough influence going forward, if you will, that he wouldn't do this, but he's done it. The one thing they're missing is control of the international financial empire. So they are now going to make a move, and it will be successful, I guarantee you, to replace the dollar with the renminbi. This is a major move for them because they understand viscerally what that does to a power. It really begins to corrupt them, as you've seen with us, because you can do deficit spending out the rear end because your currency is the one that the deficit spending is denominated in, oil sales and so forth. And Saudi Arabia right now is on the cusp of agreeing with Xi Jinping. I think we'll see that agreement within the next 12 months, where they will turn everything they do in terms of oil sales denominated in renminbi rather than dollars. This is a monumental change in the world. And look at where we are right now. Look at what we're doing right now. And if we wanted to bring this to some kind of successful end, which I don't think is even possible with regard to Iran, we put 12 million men in the field for Germany and Japan and had the Soviets to help us with 20 million plus casualties. They beat the Wehrmacht. We didn't. They beat the Wehrmacht. 90 million in Iran. We couldn't put 500,000 soldiers and Marines on the ground in Iran. They would be consumed. They would be destroyed. They would be beat.
How would they even get there, Colonel Wilkerson? How would they even get there?
That's possible. You could get them there because there are enough bottoms, amphibious bottoms, to mount an attack on the Iranian coast that would probably suffer a lot of casualties, but nonetheless, you might get 250,000 men ashore. They would be engulfed. They would be enveloped. So what are we going to do? That's the pity here.
And the revolts in America, in the U.S. would be incredible.
Yeah, the casualties that are going to occur. Let's think if he tried to implement a draft. Half the American youth would be in Mexico and the other half would be in Canada overnight. There's no way we would have a successful draft. I don't care what draconian. He could send ICE. I wish he would. And I want to disappear.
They would disappear real fast.
You can't fathom the depth of the danger that he has placed this country in, constitutionally, domestically, in other words, and internationally, globally. Patrick is absolutely right. We have no reputation left. We have nothing. It's in shreds. If I were Putin, I'd turn to Witkoff and Kushner. I'd say, special envoys, huh? Get out of my country, get out of my face, and don't come back.
Yeah. Powerful. Colonel Wilkerson and Patrick. Colonel Wilkerson said this is going to be a long war, and Ali Larijani, who's now the head of the defense forces in Iran, said the same thing. He said it on his X. He said, Iran, like the U.S., has prepared itself for a long war. And this is a unanimous statement across the IRGC, across the Iranian military, political officials. They're all saying the same thing. Your reaction to anything that Colonel Wilkerson said, but also to this. I mean, this has to be frightening the Trump administration to a bit. We've heard reports of them already scrambling. What do we do? The air defenses, surge more, send more troops, send more equipment if we have it, versus the opposite. They're in a bind here, Patrick. Oh, sorry, hold on. There you go. Patrick, I don't know why I can't hear you. You're not muted.
Sorry. Yeah, sorry about that on my end. I accidentally hit the button. Iran's been planning for this for, since the 80s, effectively. Since the Iran-Iraq war. They've been planning for this. They know that this confrontation was inevitable. And so they have, with what little resources that they have, our government talks as if like every single penny in the balance of payments in the Iran's political economy goes towards missiles and drones. It's just patently ridiculous. I mean, they're literally working on shoestring budgets. But what they're able to do on those relatively marginal and humble budgets for their defense is quite incredible. And they've been able to do this methodically over a period of years. And so you're seeing the result of this now. They only have to be lucky once. The United States has this undefeated record, supposedly, which isn't really undefeated, but in the minds of the war hawks in Washington anyway, that they have an undefeated season of the last 100 years or whatever. But Iran only needs to get lucky a few times. Trump needs to throw. I said this on an interview last week. Trump needs to throw a no-hitter. Trump needs to throw a no-hitter. He's now lost a no-hitter. Now, who's the relief pitcher that's going to come in and save this, or what sort of desperate move are the neocons or the Zionist lobby, if you will? What sort of desperate move are they going to do if the United States seems to be taking too many hits, too many casualties? What Trump has done is effectively sacrifice. He is potentially sacrificing the U.S. military footprint around the Persian Gulf. This is a fortification that the United States has built up over many decades, in fact. And so now he's threatening to sacrifice that on behalf of Israel. Israel's short-term political and military means. So that's quite significant, in terms of the U.S. ability to project power. And people say, well, Iran's made a huge mistake because they've hit targets in the Gulf states. Instead of rallying behind them, the Arab Gulf states are now, now opposing them. So this was a bad move by Iran. No, I think this was a very shrewd, canny, and a very deliberate move by the Iranians, because they're like a normative power. And if you study international relations, which nobody in Trump administration has done, if they have, I don't see any evidence of it. But what a normative power would do, a China, a Russia, a previous United States, other significant countries, they will try to impose a cost on their neighbors for acting as accessories or accomplices to another power. In other words, they want to impose a cost on the Gulf states for hosting all of these U.S. bases. And each of these U.S. bases in Bahrain, in Saudi Arabia, in Qatar, in Oman, there's facilities as well, and the UAE, in Kuwait. Each of these bases fulfills a specific role. This is a division of labor for the U.S. military. So each of them, in some way or another, form a essential role. And so now that all comes into question, and I think each of these countries are like, well, do we want to be permanently at war with Iran in order to, and the U.S. is there to defend them, supposedly. I mean, that's the sales pitch. We're going to provide defense for you, when in fact they're just drawing fire by hosting these U.S. bases there. So, I mean, it's pretty obvious how this is actually turning out, and it took Iran to push the issue. The other thing people said is Iran would never strike Cyprus because that's a NATO country, and that would trigger Article 5. And that's the stupidest argument I've ever heard, because the United States is the leading NATO power, and they've already initiated an undeclared war. So forget Article 5 or any of this nonsense. And what did Iran do? They have attacked or hit RAF Akrotiri, the British base in Cyprus, which Israel uses as an escape hatch during missile attacks, and which they use to put temporarily stash F-35 fighters and other assets, including Benjamin Netanyahu himself, in the event of a siege on Tel Aviv and so forth. So they've shown that. What are the European countries going to do? They're going to do nothing. They're going to do nothing. Why? For the simple reason is that U.S. and Israel started this war. They drew the fire to Cyprus. Cyprus is so important for GCHQ, for the NSA as a relay station. It is absolutely essential, the base in Cyprus. The fact that Iran had that on their target list, the bank of targets, shows you that Iranian intelligence in the UAE, I can tell you, and I have this on extremely good authority, their intelligence is par excellence with regards to the Gulf states. They know where everything is. They know where every U.S. CIA base is. They know where every Israeli base is. They know in Erbil, in the Kurdish regional government in Iraq, they also have demonstrated that they will hit those Israeli bases as far back as January 2020, when they responded to the assassination of Qasem Soleimani. So people have this idea that Iran's a backward country and they don't know what they're doing, and it's mullahs bumbling around with missiles and things like that. No, they're very specific in their strategy. They have prepared to respond immediately if they were attacked. They did not believe the negotiations were legitimate or sincere. And I think the U.S. has lulled itself just institutionally into a kind of complacency from the Iraq war period and the Afghanistan war period. They've reconfigured their entire military around a certain type of a profile for missions. Douglas McGregor had said this previously, I think in the summer. He said that the current U.S. forces, they really only have around just over 400,000 or 420,000 troops, and out of those that are combat ready, he said that 120,000, maybe 150,000. He said this repeatedly on interviews. And so if it's about deploying in the event of the need to put ground troops or create leverage in that way, you're talking about what available 120,000 potentially combat ready troops. That's the United States of America. They've really scaled down their capabilities over the last couple of decades and totally relied on this overwhelming deterrence. And Israel's entire defense profile is based on overwhelming deterrence. They wouldn't believe that anybody would have the temerity to attack Israel's homeland territories, and that anyone would dare hit U.S. bases in the region. And Iran has done both of those things, not once, but twice. And now in this round, so then they're just banking on the fact that, Iran's going to sort of run out of missiles. They're going to run out of drones. I wouldn't make that bet. But the United States, you can calculate more or less what they have in terms of anti-aircraft or anti-missile munitions, and what they have in terms of offensive munitions and capabilities. That you can calculate. That's a fairly straightforward equation here. So the numbers don't add up. And so then the question is, what is the upside to this attack for the Trump administration, for America? In the short term or anything else, what is the upside? No one, any of the intelligent pundits, I think, that you have on your program and the other podcasts, and Judge Knapp, and nobody could identify the upside of this attack. And so what are they doing in Washington? Like, who is running operations? Well, we've answered that question previously. So now you're in a hole. Now what are you going to do in that hole? You're going to get desperate. You're going to use tactical nuclear weapons to try to save face, and then you're into a bigger hole at that point. So that's incredible.
Well,
what Patrick just said is the most frightening aspect of it to me, because I got my hands on a transcript. He was speaking in Hebrew, of course, but I trust the translation. I don't speak Hebrew. Of his remarks, not only to the Knesset, but his remarks before that, members of his cabinet, as it were. And one of the things he ended with in Hebrew, and when he speaks in Hebrew, he's speaking expressly for, if he can maintain the secrecy around it, his audience in Israel, not the United States. When he speaks in English, of course, he's speaking for the U.S. Congress, for everybody in America, and so forth. He's very shrewd at that. In Hebrew, he ended his remarks in a way that really was frightening. He said, essentially, if everything turns sour, they will get the surprise of their life. That can only mean one thing, that he's maybe even uploaded some of the weapons from Dimona, and he's perfectly willing to use them if everything goes sour, if it turns bad, which it has every prospect of doing. So not only is it scary from the perspective of the conventional warfare that's going on, which can't possibly go for the empire ultimately, for America ultimately, but also the prospect of bringing nuclear weapons into it. Very, very vivid prospect with this man who is the #1 pariah leader in the world today. The 60% of the world, if not more, that's a lot of people, realize that he is a homicidal maniac. And one of the things that Patrick was just talking about stirred my memory of a briefing 3 days ago. Naftali Bennett was not just blowing in the wind when he said Turkey's the next target. One of the reasons Israel is doing some things in Cyprus and southern Greece that have nothing to do with what Patrick was enumerating, all of which was accurate, but this is a separate operation altogether. They're trying to destabilize Turkey, and they're going to use Cyprus to do it because that's their next target. If I were Erdogan right now, and I had half a brain, and I know some people in his military and an intelligence apparatus actually do, unlike what we think of the Turks in general, if the truth was known, they would realize that it's not in their interest whatsoever to even be neutral in this, that they need to make a decision on which side they're going to enter and how they're going to enter, because all kinds of prospects for Turkey's advantage or disadvantage markedly are here. And Netanyahu has every intent, and I suspect his follow-on entourage of leadership, once he's in jail or whatever, has every intent of expanding Israel's writ. I mean, it's clear. Greater Israel is greater Israel, and they are very interested in it. And when Mike Huckabee gave his disquisition on it, he was not joking. He's been in the corridors of power, as it were, of Jerusalem and Tel Aviv, and he knows what the Israelis are planning. So there's some people that got to wake up here, not least of all Greece, Cyprus, Turkey, and other countries that are going to be impacted, because they are going to be impacted by this, and maybe in a very significant way. So this has all kinds of ramifications. Here's what Haaretz said in one word. I was surprised to see this, but even Haaretz has got on my bad side here of late, because they have so much balance, if you will. And to construct the balance, they have to tell lies. They called it a war without end. Bingo. Bingo. And wars without end have a tendency to pull all manner of other antagonists, protagonists, whatever, into them.
Yeah. Well, Patrick, I'm wondering also what role the air defense depletion shortage is going to have. I can just show this video as you're talking. Israel and the United States are this is Israel, by the way. They are expending such a large number of air defense interceptors to counter what usually is just a single missile. And the mainstream media, and I'll show, there's the Iranian missile completely evading all of it. The mainstream media is making a lot about this. They're saying that these interceptors are fading fast, and I'll pull it up as you're speaking. The U.S. and Israel, they're spending upwards of $44 million to try to down missiles that are about $250,000. So this is a major issue. But your reaction to anything Colonel Wilkerson said, as well as to this, and I'll pull up some of the warnings about this that I've been seeing around. Hold on one second. Okay, sorry.
Iran's statements have been, they sound very confident that they have an advantage the longer this conflict goes. And that confidence is not just hollow bravado, or, it's not Baghdad Bob. They have good reason for that. Now, I have a little bit of knowledge of this because I was in Tehran 2-3 weeks ago. And I was speaking to somebody who is a general in the missile program. We'll just leave it at that. But the missiles that we saw launched last June, is important to underline that the newest of the ones you saw last June during Operation True Promise 3 were 6 years old. Around 6-7 years old. So there's two more generations of missiles and hypersonic missiles that they haven't revealed to the public in excess of Mach 10 that have the ability to change course in mid-flight, that have, and this is important, the ability to hit moving targets. And you don't need to be a genius to work out what those are for. And so there's different waves of this conflict as it could escalate. And Iran's prepared to bring out different types of tools. They have loitering drones. They have a very effective drones. They've already demonstrated what those drones can do, taking out major U.S. radar facility already. And that's just a taste of what's to come. They have the ability to overwhelm, as you said, Danny, air defenses by Israel. And so those are all things that are still yet to come. Now, the U.S. are claiming in the media that they've destroyed all of that capability. That Iran doesn't really have anything left, and they wiped it all out in the first 24 hours. I have a hard time believing that with the size of the country and the amount of strategic depth that Iran has. Just the sheer size of the country is comparable to continental Europe in terms of its size. So they have these things that they can unveil and roll out as time goes by. And then the other thing is, when you see the hypersonic missiles start coming, and when the air defenses are depleted, then they have the larger missiles that are something equivalent to advanced Scud missiles that have huge payloads in terms of explosives. These are big, heavy missiles, and they can then come and do tremendous damage once the defenses are depleted in Israel. And then they have old rolling stock, which they will send, and which has been, they'll dust off their old rolling stock and then throw that at Israel and the U.S. bases. And, it's going to be, you already saw some of the damage already in the last 12 hours. I mean, it's significant in Israel. And that level of damage, that level, and then more is what you can expect the longer this thing goes on. So that's why they're confident. This is why they're, there's no threat of a ground invasion by the United States or Israel. Maybe special forces sabotaging. I'm sure the British or SAS will be deployed to blow things up behind the lines as they normally do. And the U.S. will do that. Israel will do that. But that's not going to be enough.
Yeah, Colonel Wilkerson, to you, same question and anything you want to say about this?
Well, to Patrick's last, I understand the helicopters that they just received were expressly for taking care of SAS, and I don't doubt that for a minute. I think we're looking at a situation here, as I said earlier, that we have misjudged majorly. And I think what Patrick was talking about is one of the things we misjudged. The Iranians are really, really clever about the way they're using their missilery and their drones. They're using the cheaper stuff, if you will, which is deadly if it gets through, but isn't going to get through very often because the Israelis or we are going to shoot it down. But what are we going to continue to shoot things down with? Because we're going to run out. And we're going to run out a lot faster than a lot of people think. I'm not thinking it's much longer than about 4 days. Then they're going to shoot their better stuff. And it is going to get through without any inhibition whatsoever. And it's going to devastate targets in Israel, which is a tiny little enclave, really. And I think the Iranians are being judicious, as they always have been, especially upon striking someone with their missilery, in not hitting civilian targets, unlike Netanyahu, who loves to kill civilians. He just revels in killing civilians. They're going to take that imprimatur, if you will, off. And they're going to start hitting everything in Israel, to include civilians. They've already killed a few. I think they're going to kill a lot more. Then you're going to see Netanyahu having an incredible problem keeping people in Israel. He's already lost probably close to 1 million of the Jewish inhabitants of Israel, and he's going to lose many, many more because basically it's not going to be any kind of a safe haven anymore for them, nor is there going to be a prospect for it returning to being a safe haven. So he's got an enormous problem that brings me back to that proposition that he stated apparently in Hebrew, that he had the ending weapon in his inventory. That was clearly the insinuation, which is extremely disturbing, because if there is a place on the face of the earth, and there are several right now, to include Pakistan, that might use a nuclear weapon in the near future, it is Israel most prominently. And that's truly disturbing in my mind, and something I don't think that even with the contacts that Trump has, most of them buried up his rear end, or he buried up their rear end in Israel, are apprising him of this fact. And I don't think he understands that he's embarked on a road that could very well lead to the use of a nuclear weapon or two or three. And then let me come back to the allies. This trilateral alliance now, and it is trilateral. It's not bilateral, Russia, Iran, China, Iran. It's trilateral. All three are in an alliance with Iran. If you want to replenish Iran after it has very thoroughly devastated the region with its more sophisticated missiles, perhaps sunk one, if not more, U.S. aircraft carriers and combatants like the two stupidly positioned DDs in the Northern Arabian Sea, Persian Gulf, some would call it. If they do that and they run out of those kind of really sophisticated missiles, or they become close to running out, guess who's going to resupply them? No doubt in my mind, they're going to get resupplied, and on a timely basis. And by the way, so is Al-Ansar, the Houthis in Yemen, who are going to shut down the Red Sea again, at least for traffic coming up for Israel or for Israel's interests. So we're going to have two of the most important choke points in the world essentially sealed off. We're already seeing insurance companies refusing to insure. We're already seeing shippers refusing to ship. We're already seeing oil prices begin to tick up. We're already seeing the possibility of their rising at an alarming rate, even to exceed the rate they did previously when we got in a real pinch with it. And that's when we sunk Iranian ships, and we went into Operation Earnest Will, reflagged Kuwaiti tankers. We went into Operation Praying Mantis and sunk one Iranian warship, and we're going to sink the other one until Ronald Reagan called us off. They're a different Iran today. And if they want to close the strait, they can close the strait. And if they want the Houthis to close the Red Sea, they can close the Red Sea. We've already spent billions of dollars trying to reverse that in a previous operation. Thank you very much, Pete Hegseth. And we fail. We fail miserably. So we're talking about real, genuine, solid, unbelievable impact on the world economy that Iran all by itself, but with some help from Russia and China, can affect. And I'll guarantee you that China, who gets a percentage of the oil through the strait, and it's not the percentage someone was saying yesterday on TV. They don't get anywhere near 40%. But they do get, and I ran this by the oil experts last night, they do get about 20% from Iraq. China is probably Iraq's single country most prominent buyer. They are not going to let that get cut off. India gets a significant amount too. So you want to see India suddenly swing to the other side of the coin, if you will? This is tragic, what we're doing. This is truly tragic. This is the prospects for a much wider impact and a much wider war. And we are responsible. We are responsible. Donald Trump is responsible.
Yeah, and Patrick, Colonel Wilkerson referenced Saudi Arabia earlier, and I thought to myself, Iran's already hitting. They're hitting it lightly. They haven't destroyed Saudi's oil facilities yet, but they've hit them, and that's already causing oil prices to spike. And I'm going to put up some images of what Iran has been doing to Israel as you talk, because Israel's already taking a beating, and as you said before, the Iranians have not unveiled what they say are their more advanced capabilities yet.
Yeah, I'm not sure about the reports. I'd have to check about Iran hitting oil production facilities in Saudi Arabia. I don't know. I can't confirm that. I know that the Iranian Foreign Ministry made a statement that they're not targeting oil facilities, but maybe I was looking at an old statement. Things are happening very quickly, so I might be out of date already on that. But obviously the U.S. have been using their bases in Saudi in order to place assets to be deployed, air assets, lots of air assets. And the Chinese commercial satellite has unveiled some of those images already, which is incredible that the world has real-time access to U.S. deployment positions. That's amazing in itself. But as far as the Straits of Hormuz, if you look at the end of trading for February was the end of last week, that Brent closed at around 74. So it was already pushing up over 70. And it'll be very interesting to see what the trading markets as they close today and tomorrow, that I'm sure it's going to gap up to 80, maybe higher. And if you see that momentum past 80 after today, then midweek, you could start to see futures contracts looking towards $100 a barrel. And then, how long this goes is anyone's guess. But I will say as a caveat to that, I would not I would not be surprised. In fact, I would be looking, if I was an investigator in the United States government, that I was actually objective and an anti-corruption investigator, whatever agency is left that does that, that all of Trump's inner circle would have put bets on for a spike in oil prices. That's Howard Lutnick and the entire inner circle, that they would be basically looking for futures bets. And what they've done on Polymarket is disgusting in the last couple of days. The amount of money that people are getting windfall by betting on the Iranian attack hours before it was launched. Okay, there should be an investigation, a fraud or securities investigation into that organization that I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Donald Trump Jr. sits on the advisory board. I might be mistaken, but I think I'm not on that. But people can correct me if I'm wrong on that. But the amount of money that Trump's inner circle would have made off this war, think about it. If the Straits of Hormuz close, that's also Qatari LNG that's supplying Southern Europe. Who is the number one supplier of LNG to Europe? It's the United States of America. What's that going to do to U.S. LNG prices? Record-breaking profits for U.S. producers. So that the Straits of Hormuz closed, there is even an incentive, short-term incentive, not for the American people in terms of the inflation hit that we're all going to get, but for Trump's inner circle to make an ungodly sum of money by betting on an outcome which they themselves have initiated, and they've done so with the greatest intention. This is a level of corruption and criminality. And I tell you, I would be shocked if they're not all making money off this, this would be very easy to track and very easy for people to investigate if that's the case. Because I think I will bet institutionally with Wall Street and hit Trump's inner circle, and the people who are in the know in advance have parked their money accordingly to profit off this crisis. And that's just one aspect of it. I'm not even talking about all the other potential financial opportunities. So bad for the people, bad for us generally in public in terms of inflation, good for Trump's inner circle. That's one thing I'm going to throw out there. If there are financial forensic economists out there who could very easily start to triangulate this on a number of pundits and websites that we probably read every day.
Mm-hmm.
Now another person, Danny, that's going to benefit from this, another country, is Russia.
Mm-hmm. Well, Patrick, I know.
Wonders what kind of deals might have been made behind the scene with Putin.
Yeah. Well, Patrick, I know you have about 60 seconds until you have to run. Any final thoughts before you head out?
No. The last thing I'll say is that the other piece of disinformation and propaganda that they've been running with in the Western and our politicians is that the death of Khomeini would have triggered a collapse in the Iranian political system. Okay, I can tell you it's just the opposite. This is what I witnessed 3 weeks ago. The solidarity, the cohesiveness increased. This is in a way going to streamline moderates, even reformists, together with, quote, hardliners. It's streamlining support for the country. When I say the country, the Iranian nation. And this is the other mistake Americans just write off, is that they think Iran doesn't have a national identity as a Republican form of government. They absolutely do. It happens to have Islam at the center, and it happens to be extremely conservative, socially conservative as well. And so they're getting the opposite result. If the intended result was that somehow this was going to magically cause a cascading effect, and the house of cards of the mullahs is about to fall, and Pahlavi could ride in on a lion or something like that. It's beyond a joke. If I ran for president in Iran, I would get more votes than Pahlavi. And I'm not joking. I probably, or you would, Danny, and certainly Colonel Wilkerson would. Let's
form a
bad
ticket and see what happens.
He has no support base at all. He doesn't even know anybody living in Iran. So it's just the level of projection and fantasy on the U.S. side on this. I'm afraid that a lot of that's informing strategy. Yes. That level of delusion, and that's pretty breathtaking at this point to even think that would be the case. But it seems to be that's what's happening.
Patrick, I'll have to have you back on soon. Thanks so much. I'll be in touch, and thanks so much.
before Patrick leaves, let me confirm something for Patrick. I had a lot to do with strengthening the consulate, the U.S. consulate in Karachi. We put windows in, for example, that were impregnable right after 9/11. I watched yesterday. I watched as the Pakistanis tried to break those windows. I mean, they were assaulting them with everything they had: axes, pickaxes, shovels. That's what we're looking at. And all of this is because, you know, we say Sunni and Shia Islam are poles apart, but they're not poles apart when it comes to murdering one of the leaders of whatever sect or clan. And that's happening.
Oh, and Pakistan and Iran have a very fraternal bond as well to these two countries, as you know. And just lastly, Larry, on that embassy point, I was privileged to be able to go into the U.S. Embassy in Tehran, which has been preserved as a museum, and got to go into the skiff room, which as a U.S. taxpayer, I would never have access to see where all this money gets spent, and the encryption room, the decryption room, the skiff room, and to see all the shredded documents that they didn't finish shredding in their haste in 1979. So they rebranded it the Den of Espionage. They have a sign outside. So as an American, to me, it was a great privilege, because very few Americans get to see that, because they can, if they go to Tehran, they can actually go and see it. But it's, to me, I was incredible. I grew up watching that crisis. When Jimmy Carter was president, every night that countdown how many days the hostages were held. It was like Ted Koppel and Dan Rather and all these guys. So for me, it was a great experience. Maybe not for the neocons. What I just said is absolute heresy, I'm sure. Yeah. But anyway,
Patrick, great to be with you. We'll close up here. Your Substack is in the video description, so after people depart the show, they can tune in, or they can find you. Colonel Wilkerson, let's close out with this. I mean, there are so many crises that have arisen from here. We have the entire Shia and much of the Muslim world in the region in revolt. We see protests everywhere. We see it in Bahrain. We see Pakistan. You just mentioned what's happening to the embassy. We have people getting killed over this. We don't know how many U.S. personnel are getting caught up in this as well. We have Iranians in the streets. I don't know if you saw the images. While Iranian air defenses are active, protesting, cheering, rallying in the streets after Ayatollah Ali Khamenei was killed. We have Israel being pummeled. We don't know where Netanyahu is. Iran has said that they have targeted him. They sent Israel Herzog the president out to Bet Shemesh, where there was major Iranian attacks. And we have not yet been able to confirm where he is. Iran says they targeted him and that they are awaiting signs of life. So, Colonel Wilkerson, take us home with what are we witnessing here, and what can we expect in the coming days and weeks? The Trump administration says this could go on weeks, but there's a lot of I think concern about all this.
There should be genuine concern, deep concern, profound concern. It can't go on for weeks. It simply can't. Not in terms of the amount of ordnance that's being dropped now and maybe dropped for another 4 or 5 days. It can go on in a desultory fashion, but that desultory fashion will be met by an increasing rapidity, increasing ordnance, increasing weight of that ordnance in terms of explosive power on the other side, because the Iranians are well stocked and their allies are even better stocked, and they will not stop. I think decisions have been made in both Moscow and in Beijing that this is a serious threat, first of all, to China's Base Road Initiative and everything that it portends, which means a serious threat to China's economy, not to mention the oil. And Russia has determined that even though it's tied down in Ukraine, that one, we are absolutely untrustworthy and so no longer present a partner of consequence, and it's up to them to finish it off. But that's a ground operation. she still has, for example, submarines out the yin-yang, submarines that can operate in the North Arabian Sea, by the way, is one of the most conducive to submarine operations bodies of water in the world. The convergence zones there, the salinity there, mean you can hide a submarine beside another submarine, and no matter the active and passive sonar capability of the submarines, they don't even know the other one's there. This is really perfect submarine water. So you've got all this capacity on the behalf of China and Russia, over 100 submarines, many of which can sortie and be there in a short period of time. Some very silent diesel electric submarines with regard to China, which operate exclusively and extremely well in this kind of water. So you have the potential here for taking down much of what the empire, the American empire, represents in the world today. You have the potential for starting the unraveling of the American empire. Whether or not these other powers will take advantage of this and move forcibly and fundamentally to do it is a huge question. But it should be a question that is on the mind of the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Kane, on the mind of all the leaders of the armed forces. I don't know if Peter Hegseth has a mind, but it should be on the mind of those within the administration like J.D. Vance, who do seem to have at least a partial brain. And they should be thinking hard about the prospects for this unwinding in a very, very disadvantageous way for the country they are at the head of right now, because it is a perilous situation. And I think the greatest problem right now is none of them realize it at all.
Yeah, no, that is, they don't realize. And we even have Donald Trump saying, as we speak, Colonel Wilkerson, that they're bragging that they haven't even hit Iran hard yet. And while no doubt Iran has already, Dmitry Medvedev said this just earlier, he said that Iran is going to pay a heavy price, especially in terms of human costs, but the U.S. has ensured Iran's consolidation. And I just want to play for you, Colonel Wilkerson, just a few snippets of Donald Trump and what he is kind of demonstrating here, with what you're saying. He talks about a guarantee of more loss of life, and then when he's questioned about it, he has nothing to say. Here's Trump in these instances.
Our immense love and eternal gratitude to the families of the fallen, and sadly, there will likely be more. Before it ends, that's the way it is. Likely be more, but
that's the way it is, Colonel Wilkerson. And then he goes on to be questioned by the media. You might not be able to hear it. What do you have to say to the families of the fallen? That is what the reporter is trying to ask.
What's your message to the families of the fallen?
There you hear it. Yeah. And he just walks away. No message, Colonel Wilkerson, to the families.
He wouldn't have a message. He doesn't care. He simply doesn't care. I go back to his remarks to General Kelly, who was his chief of staff, egregious remarks. His remarks to Jim Mattis, who was Secretary of Defense, and to others who had spent their lives in service to the nation in uniform. And he clearly does not have any respect whatsoever for any of them, the highest rank or the lowest rank. He uses them as a tool for his political gain. He uses them just as he uses Christians like Franklin Graham and other absurd Zionist-loving Christians in America, the Christian nationalists, so-called. He uses them all. And just an indication of this, a minor indication, but nonetheless telltale. He was reading from a teleprompter when he was giving those remarks. Watch his eyes. He's reading from a teleprompter, however they constructed it. There is no genuine sentiment in the man's heart, brain, wherever it rests in humans at all. His entire instinct is money, the immediate family making that money, corruption, staying out of the Epstein scandal, and doing whatever he has to do to appease his MAGA following, which is rapidly falling away from him. I saw some polls this morning. I was astounded by them. And part of that's the Charlie Kirk assassination, of course, and the re-examine of TPUSA about its membership and the different things that are going on there. But a large part of it now, the thing that's eating away at the MAGA constituency now is the fact, as was expressed in one newspaper this morning. I was so stunned to see it, but they actually expressed it this way. What's happening is they're calling into question Trump's promises. No more stupid wars in the Middle East and such as that. And this, they don't compute. And MAGA is at least somewhat smart enough to figure that out. And that's going to lose him the midterms. That's going to lose him the following that is most powerful for him. And God knows what that's going to bring on us domestically, because he does not want to lose that.
Yeah. And then finally, Colonel Wilkerson, I'll pull up just one of these polls that have come out in the last day. Just a quarter of Americans back Iran strikes. This is according to Reuters, Ipsos poll, a new poll that found 27% of respondents approve of Operation Epic Fury, 43% disapprove, 29% were unsure. But it goes on and on and on. Of course, it's split partisan-wise, but nonetheless, there are people dying in this war, Americans dying. It's likely an undersell. If we want to take what Iran is saying, they say it's been far more. It's, regardless of whoever is correct, we know that there's more than likely 4 that have been killed in this. But Colonel Wilkerson, this is a pretty historic moment in my estimation. It appears that Iran has really shocked the United States and Israel with what it has been able to do. And do you foresee, we know the U.S. is saying, Trump is saying they're going to hit Iran harder, but given the overall orientation of the population, given the capabilities that don't seem to be diminishing to a significant degree by U.S. attacks, what do you see as the outcome if this does go on for 3 to 4 weeks? I mean, that's a significant period of time that a lot could happen until then. So let's close on this.
I think we're looking at a lot longer than that, Danny. And I was just thinking of how appropriate the title we selected, Epic Fury, is for this conflagration, but not the way we think. The fury and the epic nature of it is on the other side, and we're going to pay dearly for that.
And here's a question for you, Colonel Wilkerson, as we head out. What would happen if Israel used its nuclear arsenal on Iran? And I have a question to you about this. I was pondering this earlier. I said, is Israel good enough to launch these weapons before Iran finds out they're going to launch these weapons and then fires a very fast hypersonic missile to destroy their nuclear facilities and launchers? But your thoughts about this?
Oh, that's an excellent question, and I would posit it this way, knowing that I really am talking out my hat, but I am talking from some experience. For example, the 73 war. When I think this actually happened, they were getting ready to upload, and we forbade it along with the Soviets. I think Iran has very good intelligence about what's happening inside Israel. But as in any conflict, that intelligence deteriorates to a certain extent once the bombs start dropping. Sometimes it picks up in specific areas where the bombs have enabled it to pick up. And then in other places, it becomes very confusing, with the latter being the more prevalent situation. That said, I do think they would have some intelligence if bombs were being uploaded. And yes, you're right, they probably would strike them. Here's the concern. The Israelis know that. And if Netanyahu has enough complicity within the group that's doing this for him, and that's a question too, would they go ahead? Because I saw in 73 big objections within the IDF to uploading nuclear weapons. They were going to drop one on the the Egyptian Third Army, for example, because they were really seriously in Israel's face at that point. So the question becomes, how much turmoil will there be in the high command that's involved with this, and will it be something that could stop it? And then again, while that's going on, is Iran going to detect it significantly enough to interdict it, and to interdict it successfully? But to your ultimate question, look at the size of Iran. You could drop several nuclear weapons on Iran, and you could kill some people and destroy some infrastructure, but that which is underground, you wouldn't destroy. We learned that big time with regard to Soviet silos, which we put as many as 10 warheads on each one of them in order to destroy just that little missile down in the silo. That's how difficult it is to destroy underground targets, even with a nuclear weapon. All to say, it would not be that physically damaging to Iran.
Right.
Now, if you launched a whole bunch of them, I'd change my view there. If you launched 100 of them, I think they have somewhere around 202, 203. It would be a little bit different, but that would be detected, as you said.
Yeah.
You can get a reverse explosion in Israel. It's just not somewhere you want to go, though. And I think Ben Netanyahu is fully prepared to go there. And that's very, very concerning.
Yeah. And then in 60 seconds or less for you, Colonel Wilkerson, are they saving the good stuff for the U.S. fleet? Iran?
Probably.
Yeah.
Particularly those ships utterly stupidly placed in the Persian Gulf, which is so narrow and so shallow that you could swim out there with a mine and sink one of them.
This is going to be quite the historic moment that is unfolding. This war is going to be covered here daily, everybody. Colonel Wilkerson, thanks so much for joining me. We're going to head out together. Everyone who gave a super chat, who became a member, that is so much appreciated. Thank you so much for coming out today. We've had some huge audiences for our guests as we continue to cover this. I'll be back tomorrow, 12 noon Eastern time with Greg Stoker, and then Low Key will also be joining me after him. So we'll have a long 2-hour show tomorrow where we will go over everything that has transpired in the next 24 hours. Colonel Wilkerson, thanks so much. We're going to head out of here together. Hit the like button before you go. Be sure to check out all the places to support this channel, Patreon, Substack, and much more. Take care and bye-bye.
Thank you, Danny.